And we're now housing over 100 men in this building, making us the largest provider of emergency shelter services in Niagara County. We provide food, clothing, shelter, and opportunity for life transformation, all in a loving Christian environment. We are of the opinion that a relationship with Jesus Christ can change a person's life and help them through the issues that made them homeless in the first place. That's the core of why we're here. We want to partner with the community, addressing all the areas of homelessness, and veterans is one of the most important areas it is. So with that being said, I want to welcome you here. And Major Brian Chaplin in the Air Force is going to come and open us up in prayer. We'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. It's since moving here 2 years ago, I've felt loved and cared for as a citizen of Niagara County and Western New York, and so it's a pleasure to be able to be here and to thank you for the support you guys are offering to our vets. As a member of Team Niagara, 914th Chaplain, thank you for caring for veterans and taking time to be here. I invite you to join me in prayer. God, thank you for this ministry, the Niagara Gospel Rescue Mission. Thank you for their compassion and their presence in this community. God, thank you for all those who have gathered here today, whether they be civic leaders, military leaders, Lord, community leaders here, citizens that just care and want to be a part of the solution. God, your word tells us in Isaiah 58 that it's your desire for us to, or the sacrifice that you want for us, God, is to give our bread to the hungry and our home to the homeless. So as we discuss and strategize and think about how to help in this area of homeless veterans, may this sacrifice be a delight because, God, your word also says, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay for all of his deeds. So, God, would we do everything today as unto you? Would the efforts that are made today be a glory to you and a blessing to your people? So help us as we seek to aid those who have served and sacrificed so much for our country. I ask this in the name of Christ. Amen.
I'm John Cooper. I'm the Director of Development here at the Niagara Gospel Mission. And again, we're so delighted that you came to this event. I just wanted to give just kind of a why we're doing this event real quick, what the event's purpose is, and then we can go right into what we're here for. And so the first half of this event is going to be presentations from Dave Fickus, from Don McSwan, from myself about just like a testimonial about transitioning out of the military, some of the struggles we went through, or things that are hard as someone who's transitioning, and kind of, did we land on our feet? Did we land on our butts? What was the result? And then after that will be Joel Smith, who's the director of psychological health for the 914th Airlift Wing. And he's going to be talking about the psychological effects of transitioning out of the military. And that's going to be about a 30 to 35 minute presentation that he's come up with. And then after that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. There are restrooms if you need to use a restroom, and there's also food provided by Natural Link out in Lewiston, and that they provided for us. You guys can snack on that throughout this event. But after that, we want to just have a time of discussion. We all want to get together and just kind of mash our brains together as to how we can help veterans. We serve homeless veterans here. 15% of all of our clients are veterans that we house here, and so that was kind of why we started our homeless shelter, which I'll talk about in a little bit when it's my turn to speak. But we want everyone here to just talk about, Western New York Heroes is here, Amazon's here, representatives from all kinds of groups and city leaders, town leaders. What can we do to help? What can we do to further helping our veterans in this process? So I'm going to introduce Don McSwan. He is the town supervisor of the town of Wheatfield and is and the author of the book Doc. Now, the reason we're recording this is that way we can send it back to you. That way you have this in recording and you can look over it. You have note sheets in front of you. If you want to take notes, there's pens in the back. And so we have a sign-in sheet you can drop your business card in that little clear bucket, and we can email you the link for this, so that way you have it. So that's why they're recording. So if you don't mind wearing that.
I'm also in the Army, so I'm having a hard time getting this. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there's a clip. I'm Don McSwan, and I'm the supervisor of the town of Wheatfield. And I made some notes, and I saw the letter from from John and about the transition from being a veteran. Angelo, come on up here. He's also Angelo Morinello. I think everybody knows Angelo was also a Vietnam veteran. And Angelo, I'll speak first, and I won't speak for you. But I was a combat veteran, and when I went over to Vietnam, and we were both young men, and I had the feelings of being so proud as a Vietnam veteran. And being a combat medic, of course, it was not an easy time. And I was wounded twice, and I received a few medals for my efforts in Vietnam. And I'm not doing this to blow my horn. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of background about what the Vietnam veteran went through. Again, I landed during the Tet Offensive, which was one of the more difficult times during the Vietnam War. Our casualty rate in our platoon was 91%. So we saw a lot of people die and go on. And then when we came home, and not to spend time on being in Vietnam, but we saw the horrors of war, the death, the struggles that everybody went through, and not just us, but the civilians too. Drugs were an issue. Marijuana was an issue. It was our way of dealing with the day-to-day survival in Vietnam. When we came home, we landed in California. And when we landed, and I don't know if you went through the same thing, we got off the plane, and now here we're proud, we got our uniforms, you got your Purple Hearts on, everything else. There's a line of people swearing, yelling, spitting, kid killers, murderers, and we're like, are they talking to us? Do you remember this? And I'll never forget the shock. I was such a proud American soldier coming home and being treated like a convict. So we marched along this fence where these protesters with all their signs screaming, yelling, throwing stuff at us. And we were in total shock. We didn't realize how bad it was at home. And then we went through a decontamination shower. They stripped us. They had dogs there checking for drugs and put us in a warehouse that was converted into a barracks. And I remember the sinking of my heart, thinking, here I'm a veteran coming home and being brought home to this, which wasn't just the citizens there, but even the military treated us horribly. There was no welcome home, soldier, you did a great job and you survived a year in combat. And I think that was part of the difficult making that transition, because all of a sudden you come from an area where you go through pure hell and it has an effect on you. And then all of a sudden you come home and you're treated like hell too. So the adjustment period for a Vietnam veteran, if you ever do fully transition, which I can say I honestly never did. And just to give you an example, and I'm just going to look at my notes really quick. My wife was very sick with cancer, and this goes back years ago. And I remember she was next door at her mother's, and I got a call. Diane's having a seizure. So I ran next door, I got down, and right away, get me a pillow, do this, do that, do this, and that's it. No emotion, no nothing. And what had happened, she did have a brain tumor, which we had to deal with, but what bothered me more than anything, all of a sudden, I had no emotion, no love, no hate, no feelings of emotion whatsoever. And I went up to my representative. I saw a psychologist up in VA. He says, Don, you know what it is, don't you? And I said, no. I said, I look at my wife, I feel nothing. I mean, I'm treating her, I'm taking care of her IVs and all these things. He says, you're a medic again. So you think after those years, all of a sudden, you're a medic again, and that was my job as a combat medic. You treat these guys, send them on their way when you can. If you can save their lives, you do. So it just shows you how life, you think you've made that full transition, you really don't. There's always something there. And especially, and I'm not saying that the Vietnam veterans had it worse than anybody, but the treatment we got, I mean, to this day, it sticks to me. You know, when we flew home from California, I'll never forget. Any Vietnam veterans here at all? Or no? Okay, we do have some. Because of how we were treated, we stripped our uniforms out and paid full cost to get across the country because we didn't want to be harassed and treated like hell. So what does that tell you about the transition we went through? And all I can say is that through all of these experiences, some positive things come out of it in life. I'm very sensitive to a lot of things. But at that particular time, the horrors of war and the way we were treated really stuck for quite some time. And one of the things I mentioned to John earlier about the Vietnam veterans, the federal government did a study between twins. Now, I have a twin brother, the non-combatant twin and the combatant twin, the twin that used drugs and the one that didn't. And it was funny because when the study was done and we received this, and if anybody's heard of the twin study, this was done by the federal government. And they brought us down to Niagara Falls and they interviewed us. And it was amazing how the questions were the same questions of both twins. But when the final results came out, the person that was in combat, that was in Vietnam, higher suicide rate, higher illness, divorce. So it was interesting to see how that affected me personally and the difference between the veterans. So that's it, and I'm starting to go on here, but and I hope that gives you an idea of what it was for the Vietnam veteran, and I'm looking at some veterans here to make that transition if you fully ever really do. Ange?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. September 5th, 1968, first day of law school in Cleveland. The letter comes and my mother calls me. You're drafted. And after TED of 68, those of you who may have been around then, they dropped deferments for everything but medical school. So I'm a college grad, I'm in law school, I'm anticipating, I'll get an easy duty. Well, went through basic at Fort Dix, AIT, Fort Polk, Louisiana, or Little Vietnam, okay? I'm anticipating, and what they did was they took 16 college grads and made us 11 hotels, which is the 106 recoilless rifle. And that's what we specialized in, because the company commander, if they took the company flag, would get some benefits. And because it took a lot of math, and we were taught how to do tank killing and explosives, and we'd be taught to roll in front of the tanks. So we figured we're going to Germany. The 16 of us wouldn't go to OCS. 16 orders for Nam came down. Everybody else in the company, plus we won the flag for the commander. They went to Germany and Korea. Okay, it was surrealistic. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little white boy from Niagara Falls. Okay, all of a sudden I'm in this country and being told you kill anything that moves without emotion because they're going to kill you. And I extended so I could go right to law school. So I was there for 15 months. But our company, we did search and destroy and nighttime ambush. I was given the M60, but I didn't even know how to shoot it because we weren't trained in. So I ended up becoming the RTO, from a squad to the platoon to the company RTO. And we had the P25s. Now I guess you get a little phone, okay? I don't know what they have nowadays. But I got to tell you, the whole time I was there, I don't know how others took it, but it just wasn't real. Now, I was 23 when I hit country. I was with 17 and 18-year-old kids. Okay? So I may have handled it a little differently, but our first firefight was pretty emotional. And we went through all of that, but it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to get home someday. Well, now I went to Hong Kong on an R&R, and I'm told how bad it is coming back. So I had a suit made in Hong Kong. I bought a false mustache, a little goatee. So now it's time to come home, okay? But if you don't mind me telling one of the highlights of it, okay? I went to St. Bonaventure, and Bonnie and Niagara were rivals. And you could never even get into a Bonnie basketball game down in Olean. I have a buddy that went to Niagara, and he calls me and he says, "Listen, can you get a ticket for a friend of mine?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm an usher, so I can give him my ticket." My mom happened to live in Olean at the time, and I said, "I'll give him my bed in the dorm." Okay, you got to follow me because this is incredible. This is God. Okay, so I give him my bed. Give him my ticket, he goes to the game. That's it, I met him for about 2 minutes, all right? This is while I was in college, okay? I'm in Vietnam 9 months, and I get a call to go to the captain. A Red Cross is coming in, my grandfather had passed. I didn't even know what grandfather, but because my grandparents raised me, I had no father, they brought me home. They sent me back, going through finance to do all, like I think anybody knows when you go out on leave, when you go back, you go through personnel and finance, okay? And there's a captain at the window. And I'm thinking, Cap, this is usually a spec 4, right? So he's going, he goes, do you know Chicky Candela? I said, yeah. He goes, you remember giving your ticket for the basketball game? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm the guy. I swear to God. So he goes, what are you doing in combat? I said, I don't know, right? He goes, you're going to come back for finance, because I had a finance degree. And I'm figuring, and everybody in this room who's in the military knows, yeah, bullshit, okay? Well, get back to the company. The next morning, I get a call from the captain. He tells, come on over. I go over, and he says, I don't know what you did, but there's a chopper waiting for you. Your MOS has been changed, okay? So it saved my life, but I had gone through 9 months of combat, okay? And I mean, and we're talking, and I've tried to put it out of my mind, some of the shootings. So the attacks, the assaults, the destruction of the villages. I mean, anybody in Vietnam who was in combat knows what I'm talking about. It was a whole different, but it was a way of life. We were Americans. And I live right near the border. It's like I wasn't going to go to Canada because I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be that American. I was proud. So I get through all of that, and I finally realize, oh my God, I'm coming home, okay? I had an uncle who was a travel agent, so he had arranged for a ticket. I didn't have to go through what Don did, but I got, because they sent me back on a commercial airline from Vietnam. Got in the bathroom, took my fatigue, everything, and threw them in the garbage. Put the suit on, because I didn't want to be known as that person. So I did walk by those people, okay? But I kind of was able to escape. And then I put it out of my mind for a number of years. But throughout my life, I couldn't figure out why. Emotion, I was told, you're a hard ass, you have no feelings, you have no emotion. But we also came back to a very hostile nation. We came back to protests. We came back to those that blamed us for killing babies. We were bad. We were no good. And so I was fortunate enough, I was able to put it out of my mind. But it wasn't, because emotionally I was still there. And for the first few years, I'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming, okay? I'd had these horrific dreams, because the reality didn't hit me until I came back to the States. Now, as it was said, I mean, how we survived on amphetamines and marijuana, okay? Because nighttime ambush, you're gonna stay up. And there was this French amphetamine in a little glass vial that you would break the top, and it would come from France, but it would keep you up all night. Okay? So the reason I'm going into that detail is that era of veteran coming out had zero, absolutely no support, either emotional, the government didn't care, the country didn't care. And so we had all these Vietnam veterans that came out. Some were able to survive. For some reason, I was able to survive, but I'm not sure if I survived emotionally and mentally, okay? And this is a room of those that understand. So yes, I do have a counselor, and I do go for checkups once in a while, because every once in a while I need a little tweak, okay? And I'm not ashamed to admit it, okay? Because it's what happens. But the one thing that we can thank Vietnam veterans for is because the VA now giving some addressing some of the issues and focusing on what is needed. I credit that to the Vietnam veterans, and I credit to those of us who came back and became productive citizens, always trying to help the others. And now what we're faced with, okay, and these are the veterans coming out now, is a hostile nation again. Okay, for some reason, the woke movement, the socialist movement, the American Socialist Party has taken over the New York State Senate and Assembly. And there's fighting within. But so now we're still facing, even though those that may not know we are, for those of us behind us, you're facing a state and a country that is anti-military. I fear for what can happen to this country because of the lack of focus on the military and the training, okay? We're talking about countries that want to take us over, that don't fear us anymore. But this is all the emotion that the veterans have to deal with that were willing to risk their lives. Okay? So we owe them a debt of gratitude. I'm okay. I got through it. I'm successful in my own mind, but no emotion. Okay, my mom died this year. Okay, that's it. Let's go on. My aunt died 10 days before my mom. All right, I feel a little sad. And some days I can't figure out why I'm such a heartache. I just don't have the ability, okay? And that's a long-lasting effect that affects all of us. So I think I may have gone on a little too much, all right? But I want those in this room who are in the military now or who are veterans to know that we understand and we're willing to do whatever is necessary. Thank you.
And so next we have Dave. Dave is from the middle of me, which was Afghanistan, and them. So Dave, if you wouldn't mind. So Dave helps us run our veteran support group. That's one of the parts of our veteran program here is we have a veteran support group that meets every other week. And Dave and I run that group. And so, yeah, Dave.
Well, when I was asked to give, in a sense, this talk about what it's like to be in the military and not to be in the military, like a lot of people here, I grew up in this area. I went to Fort Dix and then Fort Benning, went to Germany, served with the Big Red One at Panzerkaserne, and I was one of those that joined the Army because it was either go in the Army or go into prison. I had a choice by Judge Penny Wolfgang. Well, for once that anybody knows me said I used my brain. I said, I'll go in the Army. Because at that time I thought, how hard can the Army be? They'll give me a gun and I could actually shoot something. Well, I had hair down to my waist, and I thought, okay, here we go. I get on a bus. We get into the plane and that, and I thought, this is a joke. Soon as you get in the cattle cars, man, you're getting yelled at, spit at, and my first thing was, why are you yelling at me? I didn't do nothing. Well, it was the first thing I learned. You don't talk back to a DI. Well, through all this, I realized two things. That one, being in basic training is like being home in a sense. You get torn down by your family. They teach you. We're a product of our environment at home. When you go in the military, basic training, it's their job to tear you down. Until this day, I still can't believe I signed up to go through that, but I did. I remember what I miss most of all is the backup. When you went somewhere, and most of us that are here, when you have a night to go out on the town, you go out on the town. You go to a bar, you start partying, and somebody's going to do something. Somebody's going to say something. And you could be in a bar with Marines, Navy, Air Force, no matter what. You hate each other until someone throws a punch at one of them, and then you have backup. Where out here, if something happens, I would say 95% of the people with you are going to run the other way. You're taught to stand up for things. And one of the things I learned too was how they train you to, when you're told to do something, you do it. When I got out, which was hard for me to deal with, is when my boss would say, Dave, go move this over here. I'd go over there, put it there, and in the military, I was used to them telling me I want it in that corner. Where when they tell me, this forklift moves pallet over there. All right. And I'm sitting there and waiting, well, where do you want it? Over there. And when we're taught, you don't ask too many questions. You're told what to do it, and deal with it. You're taught respect for each other. Especially now, my son has a friend that went in the military. And one thing I have to laugh at him, he says, I can't stand this guy. I can't stand that guy. And I said, really? I said, but you'll sure love them when you're in the firefight, right? We backed each other up. We worked together. In basic training, you learn the penalty of, I remember one time we were staying in formation. One of the guys swatted at a fly. Man, the DI come over yelling at us. You let him kill that fly, find that fly and bury him. Okay? Pouring rain, we did it. Come back out, now I want you to dig it up and find that fly. You know, or there was the grass drills, or the marches. And for me, I could not understand why I was being treated like that, or why I had to live like that. I'm going home. Yeah, all right. Then I realized one thing. The guy next to me, the guy on my right too, was going through the same thing. He'd gripe about it, I'd gripe about it. And we all had one thing in common. We all at one time might put skin in the game. We at one time were gonna have to stand up for each other. And I learned that when you say something, you do it. And when I got out, a lot of that went to when I raised my boys. I tell them, I don't want to hear it. When you're asked to do something at work, do it. I learned that, you know, you see things totally different. You know, we see things in the Army or Marines, no matter where, in black and white. We're to do something, we're there for one mission. And that mission is to be trained to kill somebody or defend us. And it aggravates me when I've gotten in trouble a couple times for this. And I think the wheelchair is what kept me out of jail, is when I see these little punks that like to burn the flag or step on it. Or they'll go by somebody in a restaurant that's in uniform and they'll have something to say. And to watch the gentleman or woman in uniform, in a sense, sometimes just hang their head. You know, I'm here because a lot of people don't realize that when we go to training, we're being trained to defend you, this whole country, and we don't even know them. And that was hard for me to understand until, you know, they switched it from 11B to driving tanks and APCs, and that was a hard job to do, the APC, because I have a little bit of night blindness. And I'll tell you, man, you're driving them things through a farmer's field, pitch black, and all you have is behind you, again, is somebody that should be backing you up. And that is until, and I've told this story many times, that is until you're following somebody in an APC, all of a sudden you hear a bang, and they ran over some farmer's cow. And you know what's coming. He got yelled at about it. I got yelled at about it. But it taught me that when I did get out, in anything that I do, I try to do my best. And I'm not one of those that has too good of an idea about me. And what the military taught me was, it's all right to back somebody up. It's all right to stand up for what you believe. And it's all right to back up somebody. And as far as from Vietnam, I had uncles that were there, and you know, my heart goes out to you all the time. But the only thing that I can say is the training that you learn, those of you who are in, you're going to carry that with you. And there's going to come time in your lives where you're going to need that training. I remember when I lost both my legs recently. And I'll tell you, man, it hurt. I went through pain that I never thought I'd go through. But then the whole time I'm going through this, for some reason, is I believe one of you said there's that one DI you never forget. And I had this one drill sergeant that would constantly stand up and yell that he's being watched by the Russians. And I remember him yelling all the time. And that's what I could hear. And I thought, I can do this. I can do this. I'm Army. I trained for this kind of stuff. And it got me through. And then when I had the second one, and each one of these, I never took pain medicine. Because in my mind, that would have been letting my platoon or whatever down. So as far as that, I'm the kid in the middle. You know, I could tell you about the driving and the stuff, but mainly, I think from World War I on down now, it's all a mental thing. It's how you handle it.
Figured it out. Thanks, Dave. So I'm John Cooper. I'm just going to give a quick little about my transition out. I had an ROTC scholarship in college that I lost because of being stupid and doing drugs. So that got me kicked out of the ROTC program. And then Uncle Sam was like, we need an infantryman. And so I eventually became an infantryman in the Army. And then through my time being an infantryman, I became a sniper in the Army, and it was a really good job. I re-enlisted to do a second term and come out to Fort Drum. Really did enjoy. I enjoyed my time, but at Fort Drum, I had the opportunity to go to Afghanistan, and while in Afghanistan, we were in Kabul. I was in Afghanistan from 2020. I was in 2020, so quite recently, right before the fall of Afghanistan, we were in Kabul, where all the explosions, where those Marines died. I patrolled that route every single day. Watched kids run up and down that route when we were in hide sites and stuff like that. Really, one of the things that really affected me while I was over there, and just seeing the carnage of war and stuff, it never leaves you. But one mission, we had a patrol going out, and I had to. I had a 10-year-old child in my sights, and he had a rifle. And I remember just sitting there staring through my optic and kind of tearing up, because I knew any second I'd have to kill him because he had a rifle and he was going to kill my boys that were out there. And by the grace of God, his mother came, and it was a toy rifle that he had made out of wood or something. And she grabbed him, and when we saw a new angle, we could see that I could see that it wasn't a real rifle through my optic. But the thought process of having to kill a child was something that I never forgot. Of like, this has to happen. And like you said, you have to block it out in your mind. Coming home for me was difficult in the transition, because it was during the COVID time. In Afghanistan, we didn't really care too much about COVID. We had people shooting rockets at us and stuff like that. So it wasn't really to us as big of a thing. But I remember coming home, and the shock of coming home was big as is. But then having to talk to people behind plexiglass, and being out with my wife, who's here today, and just getting very angry because they couldn't hear me through plexiglass, and I started to go into Sergeant Cooper mode and knife hand people behind the glass, and just and I understood why it was happening, but I couldn't process it. It was too much for me. And then I got out of the Army. We stayed up at Fort Drum. I was a pastor at a church up there, and I was the military pastor for a church that was made up of 60% military members. And I remember when the pullout of Afghanistan happened, like you mentioned, I just kind of broke. My brain just kind of broke. I had to go out into the woods for a few days and just sob because I was getting videos from my interpreters who I had just worked with, calls pleading to get them out, pictures of people that I had worked with who I became friends with, dead on the ground, getting burned alive with their families because they were with us fighting the Taliban. And it was something that really made me bitter for a short time. And I had a hard time processing it. And I'm very grateful for my wife who put up with me through that time. But one thing that really hit me hard when I started to really process what I had been through in the military, and I remember as a Christian, I went and I got asked when I tried out for snipers. I did well in my tryout, and you sit in front of a board of all these higher ranking people, and they want to interview you as to why you want to be a sniper, and they pick apart your performance and your shooting, and why was this little bit off, and stuff they should do. And the only really question they asked me was like, as a Christian, defend how you could kill someone in combat. And so from a young Army age, I had to already think through these things as a Christian. How can I take someone's life in combat? But what really affected me after getting out, and for those of you who were in the military, you're going to think I'm a crazy man for saying this, but those who are in are going to understand. While you're there, you actually enjoy the enemy dying. You enjoy winning. And so there's this sense where you enjoy winning, but then you think about it afterwards, and it's like, I just enjoyed watching someone die. As a person with a family, watching people blow up, you laugh because that's how you got through the war. But you think about it afterwards, and you're like, how did I laugh at something so heinous? And it really affected me, not so much because I saw it, but because I enjoyed it. And that really affected me pretty hard. So I was going to school full time. I was watching the kids while I was going to school online. My wife was working as up in Watertown, and then she lost her job, and that kind of put us into a panic mode really quick, because I was like, okay, here my plan was to go to school, get my degree, and go back into the Army as a chaplain was my original plan. But now here I am. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my plan that I had set forth that, of course, was bulletproof because I made it. Obviously wasn't bulletproof, so it was like Swiss cheese. And I started I got a job very quickly under the table working at a funeral home. The funeral home director knew me, and he said, he goes, well, you stack bodies in the Army, you probably won't mind doing it here. I said, you're right, I won't. So I didn't mind, working at a funeral home, and so I did that until we moved back here. And I'm very blessed and very fortunate to have my parents who took us in until we could find a house. We just bought a house here in Niagara Falls, and I didn't really know what to do. I said, man, every plan I thought I had, the Lord has kind of taken me down a different route, and I was trying to figure it out. In the Army, as was said before, like you're told go, and you're told how far to go, and you're told when to stop, and it's very, very easy. And sometimes that frustrates you if you're a creative mind, but it also is a sense of comfort. But when you're out, especially when you lose everything, and you have to figure it all out on your own, and you have a wife and 2 kids, and now I have 3 kids, and you're trying to figure all this out, and the temptation, because a contracting company offered me $120,000 a year to go be a sniper in Africa. So I said, well, that's $120,000 a year. I could use that. My wife was like, no, we don't need it that bad. And so ended up here, and I started working with the Niagara Gospel Mission as a kind of a part-time job. But one thing about Tom that you may not know is when he prays, it's usually answered. So he was praying I would stay. And so God said, well, Tom's a lot smarter than John. We'll listen to him. And so I ended up staying and working here. And I noticed that 15% of all of our clients were vets. And as I started seeing that, I was like, we got to do something. The Niagara Gospel Mission cannot solve veteran homelessness, right? All of us in this room, that's a huge thing to tackle, right? We can't really just say, okay, we're going to solve this today, right? But we can start by helping 8 people. We can start by, doing what we can. One soul at a time, one person at a time. And that was our passion for starting the veteran program, which is 8-bed emergency shelter for veterans here in Niagara Falls, and then also a veteran support group and a connection with the VA, where we get them immediately connected with veteran services to help them out. And so that's just a little bit of my story and what we're doing here. I by no means went through, the worst of anyone. I probably had it easy compared to a lot of people, but I'm fortunate to be here. We all remember those we lost. We try to every day to honor them with our lives, living in a way and working with guys who are trying to commit suicide and fighting veteran suicide as well has been a passion of mine. As I've lost a lot of guys who committed suicide, not just overseas, but committing suicide here, and a couple of them because they couldn't find a job when they got out. And so that's our passion here, is that way we don't have that happen to anyone that comes through our doors. And again, I can't personally stop that, right? I can't just say today it stops, but we together can one person at a time help. And so when I met Joel, who's going to be our main presenter for the day, when I met Joel, he said he had this warfighter wisdom, right? War wisdom, right? And so he had this thing. I was like, okay, cool. And I gave him my whiteboard, and he just explained me, right? So I was like, this is awesome. And then that's kind of how we made this event, because I was like, this is something that we all should hear, those who are in the military and those who are our local leaders, so that way we can fully understand. And then after Joel's done, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then I really encourage you, we're just going to have an open discussion about what the city of Niagara Falls, what the town of the Porter, wherever you're from, and whatever you do, what we can do together to help just one veteran at a time. We have a few veteran services here as well. And so without further ado, Joel.
Tell you about myself real briefly, and where I'm going to go with this presentation, because my goal is in the next few minutes that some of you, maybe for the first time in your life, have had you explained to you. I'm the Director of Psychological Health at the 914th Air Refueling Wing, so I'm the counselor there for the 914th Air Refueling Wing. But how I came up with this, my background is I'm a retired police officer from West Virginia. That's where I'm from originally. I've been here now about 8 years. My wife's from the Buffalo area. I still teach at the West Virginia State Police Academy. Every 3-4 months I'm down there teaching a similar course on what we're going to talk about today, because in my generation, in law enforcement and military, and your generation, we didn't talk about these things. There was a huge stigma. The sheriff's here. I want to compliment the sheriff, because I was asked multiple times to go to the sheriff's department by the sheriff and explain some of these to his senior leadership, to his deputies, some of his special units. In law enforcement, I got to tell you, there's a huge suicide problem, and we don't talk about that either. So trying to talk about these things and let people know why we see the world the way we do are huge. I'm also a major in the Army. I'm a behavioral health officer. For over 10 years, I was assigned to a combat stress team. The combat stress teams in the Army are a product post-Vietnam, where we take a behavioral health provider and an NCO, behavioral health technician, and we embed them in a combat arms unit. I was deployed all of 2020. I was in Syria and Jordan. I was the behavioral health officer for those 2 locations. From an Army standpoint, it was a great career opportunity for me, because I covered 7 bases, and 3 was the Special Operations Joint Task Force. So it was the Special Forces world. Very unique world. It was humbling to get to be with those folks, but definitely different. My wife is also an Army behavioral health officer, and she also works at the air base taking care of our airmen. She was deployed in Iraq. She was the behavioral health officer for northern Iraq for an entire year. Unfortunately, during our deployments, we had people killed where we were, people wounded, and we also had a suicide at each one of our locations while we were deployed. I have 2 sons in law enforcement. One was a trooper, is now an FBI agent. He's an Afghanistan veteran. He was actually in Afghanistan for the withdrawal. And I have another son who is a trooper in West Virginia, who is an Iraq veteran, was at the same location my wife was at exactly 1 year prior. So we say at my house, we get it. My wife and I jokingly say we know the answers to the test when it comes to life post-war and readjustment, but I'll tell you that it doesn't make life easier for us. We are no different than our brothers and sisters who have served before. Now, I also spent about 10 years at a vet center as a counselor in West Virginia, working for the VA. 4 of those was part-time while I was still a policeman, and then I was there full-time prior to coming here. I've had the humbling experience of working with World War II veterans, POWs, and every famous battle you've ever heard of since World War II, I've had the humbling experience of working with somebody who was there, who endured it, who survived it. In my police career, I had 2 friends killed. So I put together some of this information as I work specifically with military and law enforcement pretty much exclusively. And I put this together to try to give people some more clarity on how they see the world. So I'm going to put this up here, because during the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and even at our installation, and around the country, so many people that had skin in that game were triggered. I experienced it as a parent who had a son in Kabul at the time of the withdrawal. I was asked by a large alphabet agency in Washington, D.C. to come and present some of this information, because nationwide, a lot of their employees who were Afghanistan veterans and Iraq veterans were being triggered. So I did that, and then I was asked to come back, and a good friend of mine, who's also an Army behavioral health provider, who heads up behavioral health for this agency, said, hey, some of the PhD people in that room were talking after your presentation. Do you have that copyrighted? And I was like, no, and I've never developed it for that reason. And she said, yeah, we're not having you coming back till you do that, because some of your peers are going to steal your work. So that's why I put that up there. All right, I want you to follow along here with me for a second. A lot of times I ask people, how has your military service changed you? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that question right now, because we've already heard how military service changed us. And I would like to add in some of this post-military life readjustment, it's forever. Now that's not a bad thing, and I want to explain why. But if I showed you this picture and I simply said, hey, what is this? Well, it's a coat hanger, right? But our perceptions change. If I told you, no, this isn't a coat hanger, this is an angry octopus, I just changed your perception, and I promise you from today on, next time you see one of these coat hooks, you're going to look at it like, I'll be darned, that does look like a hanger. Okay. I want to explain what I call this war wisdom scale. This line right here represents the person you love the most in your life. So think about who that is. And then it represents the people you love most in your life. And let's take it one step further. It represents everybody down at Walmart where we're going to stop on our way home to get bread, milk, or whatever else we have. From the time that you've done this, in a very short period of time, in a pretty violent environment, let's be honest, basic training, you learn discipline, teamwork, sacrifice, mission comes first, take care of the person on your left or your right. So on a wisdom scale, you're up here. And that was brought to us by our drill sergeants. And Chief Peters, our command chief at the Air Base, was a drill sergeant, so he was one of those folks that brought that into our world. He has a lot of experience in that area. This person now has taught to live in a threat-based world. So you now live in this threat-based world. Why? It's alert, alive, pay attention to your surroundings, situational awareness, all those little things, even the little details when somebody walks by and they don't salute and they get called out. A lot of times that's not ego. That's, hey, you need to pay attention to your environment, whether it's here or it's out in a combat zone somewhere. So now we have this trained military person. Now let's take them, remember we're talking about wisdom, let's take them and let's deploy them to a third world country where, like in my experience, or Afghanistan, Iraq, CENTCOM veterans, Syria, wherever the case may be, it's like being in biblical times with Toyota trucks. You're seeing a culture you cannot imagine. You know, Vietnam veterans, Korea veterans, World War II, you're just seeing this culture you can't wrap your Niagara Falls head around. And you're living under a chain of command. You eat with, sleep with, shower with, work out with, share latrines with hundreds of people every day, all day long. There's no escape. There's zero privacy. The only privacy you get, if you're lucky enough, depending on your job, if you have a mattress, your little 3-foot-by-7 mattress, if you're in a combat arms unit, it's wherever you end up at the end of the day or the morning, and you make the best out of it, and you do some pretty primitive things to survive, and you're living in that world. And I want to point something out, though. I didn't say anything about combat yet. That's just the military life in a deployed environment. Oh, by the way, there's people there that want to kill you. And people in your operation are being killed and wounded. And not necessarily right beside you, but you don't have to go far to find it. It's not the training world anymore. It's for real. And once you folks in the military, you know when you leave the safety of this country and you go to any foreign country, but especially you go to a foreign country where there's a war going on, you can't trust anybody. So now on this wisdom scale, you're up here, but you're pinging all the time. But then it becomes the norm, and you don't even feel it anymore. So this person sees the world from up here, and this is an awesome place to be. This takes nobility, and it takes the one word I think that we're all connected with in the military, no matter what branch, what job, and that's sacrifice. We all sacrifice, whether it's in your training, being away from home, being away from your loved ones, sucking it up because you got to get stuff done to take care of the person on your left or your right. We know sacrifice. So this person now, as I say, is a tactical thinker with common sense on steroids, who thinks 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. But it becomes the normal, natural thing for you. You don't even realize you're doing it. It was a gradual process. You learned it in training, and it got reinforced in the real world. Now you see the world from up here. This person, though, if they don't know it's them, often is told, you're too controlling, you're too protective, you think you know everything. They sometimes have problems with concentration and focus. Why? They're thinking 2 steps ahead of everybody all the time. They do it naturally. They learned it in training, and then it got reinforced. They don't like to be criticized. They're critical of other people's mistakes. And they're being told that all the time. Who are they being told that by? The person or the people that love them the most. The people in our own family. Maybe the family we're trying to raise. Everybody at the Sabres game and everybody you're going to pass at the Walmart tonight. Look at this. There is one heck of a gap between you and the person you love the most. Between you and the children you're trying to raise. Between you and your neighbors. Between you and maybe the people you're serving as a public servant or whatever your job is. Now, these folks are looking up at you saying, you're depressed, you're bipolar, you have PTSD, you're anxious, you're this, you're that, and they want to put a name on everything. This person, they're confused. They know that they've changed. They know that they're different. But they're puzzled because they're thinking, why is that bad? That's not bad. I know sacrifice. I know fear. I know what it's like to take care of somebody else. On and on and on. So what happens is, these folks don't understand them. This is a tactical thinker with common sense on steroids who thinks 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. But because there's not many of these folks throughout our day, man, there sure is a lot of these folks. Here's what we do. We isolate. Our circle of friends gets smaller. We have our man cave or whatever. We quit doing things we used to do. I'm not going to the Bills game because I hate people, blah, 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 blah. And it becomes our personality. I want to give you an example of this person, though, from people I know that I've worked with. I had a young Iraq veteran one time learning that this was him. So he brings his fiance into therapy, a therapy session with him, and he does what everybody thinks they're going to do when they bring their partner into therapy. They're just going to throw them at you. And they say, here, fix them, and they give you this giant scroll of problems and everything they do wrong. And by the time they walk out, I pull out a magic wand, and they don't see it, though, and fix all their problems, and they go on about life happily ever after, right? No. So this lady comes in, and she says, I want to tell you about something that he's done just last week. So she said, we're laying on the couch, and we're holding each other. And she's describing this very intimate moment. It wasn't anything sexual. They were just holding each other, having this very intimate moment. And she's thinking to herself, he's a great guy. We're going to make it. I know we're going to pull this off. I love him so much. And she's describing like butterflies floating around the room and birds chirping and somebody's playing a violin in the background, like this, Hallmark love scene is what she's describing. So she says to this guy, remember she's down here, even though they're on the couch together. She says to this guy, what are you thinking right now? So he says, right now? And she said, yes, what are you thinking right now? This guy said, well, if somebody kicks the door into our apartment, I'm going to kick the coffee table over, and he describes this assault plan to kill him. So she looks at me and she's like, we're having this intimate moment. He's thinking about killing somebody. He's crazy. What's wrong with him? He's this, he's that, he's da-da-da-da-da-da. You know what this poor guy didn't know how to explain yet? And probably a lot of you, because nobody maybe ever talked to you about you before. He was in that moment with her. He saw the butterflies, heard the birds chirping. He even heard the guy playing the violin. But he's a tactical thinker with common sense on steroids, thinking 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. It became his personality. He learned it in training, and it got reinforced in the real world. He was in that moment with her. And he thought to himself, this is a woman I love. I want to be with her forever. If somebody tries to steal this from me, I'll kill him. And here's my plan. And he can do it like that. And like so many of you sitting in this room can too. That's how we evolve. Now I want to throw something else out too. This person is also, I'm going to make up a hypothetical situation. Let's just say we have a military person or a veteran. We'll just say it's a male. He's at home, he's sick as a dog, it's 10 o'clock at night, and his wife says, oh my gosh, I forgot, I got to send cupcakes with our daughter to school tomorrow. I don't have any cupcake mix, I got to run out to Walmart. He says, all right, listen, when you go to Walmart, slow down, watch for the deer. There's weirdos at Walmart. You never pay attention to your environment. You need to be careful, blah, 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 blah. And he goes down this list of stuff. And she looks at him and says, really? Who do you think runs this house whenever you go off to your next deployment, your next 2, 3, 4, 5-week training? Or who do you think runs this place when you're not here? And this guy is totally confused. Why? Because he swears he just said, I love you. Please be safe. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. It's not what he said, but he thinks he did. He's a tactical thinker with common sense on steroids, thinking 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. So, there's one of the reasons why military folks and in law enforcement world, the same population, same people, same thought process, same everything. We feel most comfortable amongst each other. Just hearing some of you folks talking here today, I feel comfortable. Why? I don't have to explain myself to you, and you don't have to explain yourself to me. We see the world from the same set of glasses. That's comforting for us. We know somebody's not going to ask us some weird, off-the-wall, bizarre question or whatever, but oftentimes it leads to us isolating. And I know this is common for us, and I'll tell you, as a therapist, and more specifically a trauma therapist, I'll tell you that's all right. If that's how you can manage stress in your life, it's okay. Nothing in the mental health world, nothing is a problem in your world unless it affects one of 2 areas, either your employment or your intimate relationships. You can be as depressed as you want. You can be chronically depressed. If it doesn't affect your performance in employment or in an intimate relationship, it's not a problem. So, if you went to somebody, I'm just going to say in private practice that doesn't understand, military, law enforcement, whatever, and they say, Joel, what do you do for social activities? Like, I don't do anything. I like to stay at my house. I hate people, blah, 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 and I get down my list. They'll say, oh, no, that's a problem. We need to increase your social activity 1 to 3 times per week. And we're going to track that for the next month. Don't do that to our military population, because we live life by a standard, and you just set them up for failure. They're not going to be able to do it, because this is the tactical thinker with common sense on steroids, thinking 2 steps ahead. You don't lose that, ever. That's why we continue to readjust throughout our life. Readjustment post-war is a lifetime event, a lifetime process. So I'll tell people, if this is you, and I've predominantly worked with a lot of Vietnam veterans who have gone decades of living this life, decades of not knowing this is them. So what's it become? It becomes my husband's personality. Hey, that's my dad's personality. Don't say that in front of him, he'll lose it. Don't do this in front of my brother, blah, 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 blah. If this is you, what I suggest is every once in a while, just push your perimeter out a little bit. Now, let me explain it. I had a combat trauma group that I worked with every Monday that met from 10 to 11 o'clock. It was about 12 men, all Vietnam veterans, significant combat trauma. One man in that room had 2 silver stars in 1 year in Vietnam. That was the level of men in that room. A lot of Purple Hearts, went untreated for decades. I love those guys. Very challenging group to be with, but I love those guys. So a guy came into group therapy one time on a Monday and said, hey, I'm going Black Friday shopping with my wife on Friday. He might as well said, I'm going to execute the Pope on national TV tomorrow at noon. Tune in. It's going to be me. Because everybody in the room was like, don't do it. Joel, he's spitting his meds. Don't let him go, blah, blah, blah. So he said, nope, here's the difference. I got an ops plan. So now I'm listening, because you don't need to know psychobabble garbage. It's my job to take that out of your life and give you some tools. So I use terms with people like, hey, let's develop an ops plan. Let's develop 3 or 4 courses of action here. If one of them fails, let's go to the next one. It's okay. It's what we do in the military. Let's have a PACE plan. Let's have a primary and an alternate and a contingency and an emergency plan. Because what I'm saying is, if you fail at this, it's okay. We've got a backup and a backup. And it's what we do in the military. It's planning. So this guy said, no, I got an ops plan. He said, I told my wife, I want to go shopping with you for you. If I get overwhelmed, I'm going to go to the food court and I'm going to have coffee. If that doesn't work, I'm going to go to my truck, listen to the radio, take a nap, do whatever. But I want you to stay and shop. Because like this guy said, I put my wife through hell for 38 years. It was always about me. I isolated. So week goes by, comes back in. I'm probably as excited as everybody else. I got to hear what happened. So he comes in and everybody's joking, saying, well, you didn't kill anybody, you didn't see on the news, blah, blah, blah. And he said, nope. He said, I did it. I went. I didn't have to go to the food court. I didn't even have to go to my truck. I did not enjoy it. I don't plan on doing it again anytime soon. But the message I sent to my wife was a game changer in our marriage. That's a big deal. That is huge. You know, in counseling and all this stuff, we're just looking for a little shift. There's no magic wand. There's no completely turn your life around and start doing this. It's just a tiny little shift. I want to add to this. In my job at the VA and the Army, not my job now at the 914th, and it's one thing I love about my job, because our program in the Air Force is to come see me for some solution-focused counseling, 1 to 3 sessions, because it's typically normal life stuff, and we can get you back on track. You're not broken. However, there's no documentation for that. I'm not diagnosing anybody. I love that. Our people can come and see me, and there's 0 consequences to the military career. And that's what we all, including myself, fear, is if I ask for help, it's going to damage my career. So, but in my job as a licensed counselor, part of that, except at the Air Base, is to diagnose people. And I will tell you, especially my career at the VA, I've diagnosed a lot of people with this thing we call post-traumatic stress disorder. But I'm also going to tell you that's nothing more than an administrative process for documenting treatment, for insurance billing, and maybe for a service-connected claim. That's it. I told you before I worked with POWs before. I worked with a POW who was held captive by the Japanese for 6 months and 2 weeks, almost starved to death and beaten. Guy went on later in life to become an attorney, highly successful, a complete gentleman, one of the most kind, loving men that I've ever been around. On this scale, he's way up here. When people have a PTSD diagnosis, it's usually mild, moderate, or severe. He's easily severe, and we can easily document that and justify it. But here's what I'm going to tell you about this person, and I believe this with all my heart, and I may sound a little bit arrogant. I don't care. This person right here, they're not broke, and they don't need fixed. They simply need understood. We're living in this world, and we're here. There's one big gap between us and the people we love the most, us and the person we love the most, us and our families, us and our neighbors. This person's not broke. They don't need fixed. They're a tactical thinker with common sense on steroids who's thinking 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. You know, it was mentioned earlier. I want to describe something that we learn at a young age in the military. In our law enforcement world, we do this every single day at work. We don't even realize we're doing it. And then go back, sir, to something you said. We learn when we get in this world, deal with a lot of serious stuff. And there's a lot of emotion. Well, guess what we can't do that we learned back here in the day when we had people like Chief Peters explain to us how military life's going to be. It's a standard. Is we don't have time to worry about emotions or feelings. So what do? We deny ourselves this normal, healthy ability to feel emotion about something, and we dismiss it. Why? Because I have to remain professional, and I've got a job to do. And then I go to the next thing. And then I go to the next thing. And then I go to the next thing. And I'm denying myself this ability to feel emotion, and I dismiss it, and I deny it, and I dismiss it, and now I'm master it, and I don't even recognize it. And I'll share, at a young age, at 21 years old, 22 years old, I was doing it as a police officer. I didn't know I was doing it. And then somebody I loved died, and I had nothing. And I recognized it. What is wrong with me? I got nothing. I'm not feeling anything. And then somebody, now they don't know that I'm thinking about that. And then maybe John comes up and he's like, Joel, what's up? Like, Grandma was your favorite. Like, you're not even reacting. You okay? Now I'm thinking, holy crap, is there something wrong with me? No. I'm a professional who's had to learn to deny and dismiss. But we learn that through this thought process. I want to show you a normal thought process real quick. So, a normal thought process. An event happens in your life. Let's just say you left here, you go do a scratch-off ticket, you win $5,000. $5 investment, $5,000. Yes. But maybe that event was your grandma raised you, and you just found out she suddenly passed away. The next thing in this normal thought process is B. The event leads to B, which is a belief. You have a belief about it. $5,000, I got some financial freedom. My grandma just died. I should have went over to see her yesterday like I thought I should have. Then B leads to C, which is a feeling. An event happens, you have a belief about it, and it leads to a feeling. My grandma died, I'm going to be sad. $5,000, I feel great. I've never known financial relief. And then that leads to D, which is a reaction. And your reaction might be tears, grief, you punch the wall, or your reaction is you're jumping in the air, pumping your fist, you got $5,000. And then that can obviously lead right back to another event. So this is a normal thought process. An event happens, you have a belief about it, causes a feeling, you have a reaction. Let's go back here from when you did this in your initial training. You were taught. An event happens, you react. An event happens, you react. An event happens, you react. Why do we do that? Well, because when we're overwhelmed, we get into our frontal lobe of our brain and we just think like cavemen, like we have no intellectual property going on. So an event happens, you react. And then we get good at it and we master it. Because we're told back here, you know what? I don't care about your beliefs, and I sure as heck don't care about your feelings. Get rid of them. An event happens, you react. An event happens, you react. Well, we master this. And at the scariest times or the most overwhelming times of your life, well, it works. It works like a champ. Well, gosh, if it worked back in Vietnam, if it worked in Iraq, if it worked here or there, well, it's got to work in my marriage. It's got to work as a parent. It's got to work as an employee. Worked at the worst times. And then we're puzzled when we have this conflict because it doesn't. So what do? We just need to really pay attention to some of these things and then recognize, when do I apply it? I don't apply it to every situation. Okay. This person often has issues with trust, and it makes sense. My brothers and sisters in law enforcement, talk about a group of people that in God we trust, everybody else we run through NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. That's because, in law enforcement, think about it. You're only dealing with 10% of the population, 90% of your day. So what is it when you deploy? How many of those people are good? How many are bad? Don't drop your guard. Pay attention to your surroundings. It's a threat-based world. Don't drop your guard. They're all bad, right? Because that keeps people alive. That keeps you safe. So this person has a very sensitive BS filter. Very sensitive. They can't have a normal conversation with somebody. Let's say John and I are talking and he's telling a story and I'm going, that's probably 80% BS, 20% the truth. And then he shares another story like, that was probably 60% true because I was there, but that 40% is BS. And it just becomes your personality. This person, again, remember that diagnosis I was talking about? For most people, it just becomes your personality. That's just how my dad is. Don't say anything in front of him. He's going to lose it. Hey, that's just how my mom is. Don't bring that topic up around her. Hey, that's how my brother is. Don't do that. Whatever the case may be. They're not broken. They don't need fixed. They simply need understood. One of the last couple things I want to throw out is in my job, and especially in my deployed job, I mostly worked with E6 to 06 colonels. The junior enlisted I dealt with because of breakups. Their mother was their power of attorney and maybe wiped out their account. The people that I deal with most are senior people who have a lot of experience and have families and kids and maintaining multiple aspects in their life and in their world. I recently did an annual rotation at a military hospital, and I was doing a lot of assessments for several weeks. In a 2-week period, I had 4 lieutenant colonels come in. Think about this. Showed up in uniform with their name tape to a hospital on a mental health floor and went up to a window where there's a young junior enlisted person and said, I need help. And I'm not talking about the run-of-the-mill person. I'm talking about a bomber pilot, a surgeon, a logistics person that has incredible high-level logistical experience. Because what do we do in the military? And we do it the best, and we do it in law enforcement too. We're so guilty. We push, 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 and we don't stop. Why? Because in this world you learn, and then you live here, you take care of everybody else first. That's what a leader is. You take care of yourself first, you look like a dirtbag. You take care of everybody else first, you get awards, you get rank, and people will do anything for you. And that reinforces that. So what I see when I deal with people who have a lot of experience is they just push and push, where maybe the average civilian, they go get help. But in our world, we got stigma to deal with, we got career stuff to worry about, and we just push and push and push. And then when those people came in to see me, they literally sat there and like, oh, I can't breathe. Why? Because they went college, commission in the military, professional military education, promotion, transfer, move. Oh, by the way, I got this side thing I call family. And then and now they got 25 years in. And they're like, what the heck's going on? Last thing I want to do, I want to read something to you. Throw my notes aside. So when I was a counselor, I started a program with some of the group counseling sessions I had with Vietnam veterans, and where once a year I would ask them to bring in their significant other, and I would tell those guys, like, go home, go have coffee together, whatever, drop off your significant other, I don't want to see you for this week. And then I would just ask them to come in and say, hey, what's going on in your life? I need to know if I'm successful or I'm failing. And so I had several wives. They would come in, and I have them just write down some questions that they had. I want to read some of their questions that they had. And these I photocopied them, but these are spouses' real notes. He goes into a dark world and he won't talk to me. If I try to talk to him, he gets really angry. He says, just leave me alone. The next day, it's like nothing ever happened and all is well. And there he goes again, very angry with the whole world, and he has terrible road rage. All of the things that are wrong that he can't change but complains about how it should be corrected. Every time we're in the car, he worries about cars coming up on him really fast and riding the bumper. He complains when I go with the grandchildren to the zoo or swimming, but he won't go. So the grandchildren don't ask him anymore, and he feels left out. What makes him moan at night and fling his arms around while he's sleeping? I don't understand my husband always wanting to control everything, though he asks for my opinion. But if I don't agree, I'm the bad wife, so I always need to agree. My husband wakes up sometimes shaking, but he won't talk to me about it when he does. My husband can't even take a small amount of criticism, and he also carries a lot of guilt because he came home alive and so many did not. Why can't I voice my opinion without getting into a fight? We're 6 years apart in age, and he treats me like I'm a child instead of his wife. And I'm not allowed to go anywhere if it's storming outside. Everything overwhelms him, and he's hypervigilant. He gets into a panic attack, and he hyperventilates. You know, I like to say that a lot of times it's the same script, a different actor. And these are people who are at this level, that are tactical thinkers with common sense on steroids, who think 2 steps ahead of everybody at all times. I had an NCO come to me during my deployment, and he said, sir, I'm not really good about talking, but there's some things I want to say. Is it okay if I write it down? And I was like, yeah, that's a genius idea. Why don't you do that? Let me grab that. somewhere here in my stack. Oh, here it is. So he wrote me this letter, and I'm going to share it with you because this really summarizes so many people. And this person had 2 prior deployments to Afghanistan. Sir, I'm writing this down as it's very hard for me to express my emotions in person. I don't know why. It's just difficult for me to talk about how I really feel because as soon as I get the nerve to say how I really feel on the inside, I quickly change my mind and I try to present a positive image again to people. It's like my brain prevents me from actually saying what I need to say as a protective measure. I have worn a mask for quite some time now to make it appear as though everything's okay, but it's not working. People often think of me as the positive NCO that's always looking out for each and every soldier that I encounter, which is mostly true. I do look out for soldiers, but I need to say this, and I don't know if I'll have the nerve to do it in person. I'm not okay. When I'm around other people, I have my happy-go-lucky mask on, but that's not how I really feel. When I'm alone, the mask comes off and I feel overwhelmed with emptiness, and oftentimes my mind takes me to darker places. I've had several close calls on my last 2 deployments and even lost a few friends along the way. Since then, I felt numb when it comes to the thought of death. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to maintain a smile, and people are starting to notice that something's wrong and that I'm distant and distracted. I know we spoke before and you mentioned the slump that people get into when they're here, but I've had this going on for almost 10 years now and haven't really had the nerve to talk about it to anyone. I hope that eventually I would wake up and the gray, empty feeling would be gone, but it's not. I try my best to distract myself with the gym and everything, but that distraction's only temporary and the feelings come back shortly afterwards. I've gotten to the point that I'm numb to my own feelings as well as how other people feel. I'm very afraid that saying this will affect my military career, but I think it's time to get help. That is the prime example of the people I work with, whether it's in the military, in law enforcement, they're afraid to speak out. And so I appreciate the fact you said, hey, I check in every so often with somebody to talk to. We have to have that. This person's not broke. They don't need fixed. They simply need understood. The last thing I want to do is I want to share with you the way a young Iraq veteran came in one time to explain himself to me. And I was really impressed by this because he did it poetically. And he was trying to describe how he's changed post-war. And he said, you know, my life was like this pond when I was growing up. And it was this beautiful place that I'd go swim and fish. And it had beautiful greenery around it and flowers. And it was so calm and peaceful and warm. It was my safe place. But since I've been home from my deployment, I feel like while I was gone, somebody went and grabbed this giant rock and they threw it out in my pond. And they made it this muddy, sloppy mess, and it's killed the vegetation, and it's made the water all muddy. So I've been in there, in that pond, because I want to get that rock out. So I'm in my pond trying to find this rock. I want it out of there. But I realize I'm making the pond worse, because I'm panicking. I'm trying to get this rock out. And then I realized nobody knows that rock's in there but me. So I decided to just let it go and let my pond go back to how it was. There's always going to be a rock in there. I know that. But nobody knows it but me, and now I have to find a way to deal with the fact I have a rock in my beautiful pond and let it get back to how it was before. I thought that was so amazing how he described that. Very last thing I'm going to leave you with is I want you to think about all of the challenging things you've been through in your life. Some of the normal stuff, growing up, being bullied, maybe as a teenager or young adult, you've had a devastating breakup with somebody you love, or maybe as an older adult. Maybe somebody you love died, or maybe a lot of people died. The pet that you loved that died, that passed away. Stress, finances, all these tough things that we go through. I bet you never once you stop for a second to think 100% of the time you successfully got through it. Somehow, some way, you successfully got through it. Whatever you're facing today, and I know people walking in this door seeking help, so many times we see they're not broke, they don't need fixed, they need understood. And that stuff just drives us who we are, drives our behaviors to where we isolate or we find other things to cope with. But remember that in whatever your struggles are, that 100% of the time you got through it, or you wouldn't be sitting here. Yes, sir.
You know, before you end, there's something I never realized all these years. and you brought it up about isolation. When I came back from Vietnam, and I'm sure there's other veterans, and I didn't realize until you said this today. When I came back, I just wanted to hang with Vietnam veterans. Family wasn't important. My marriage was almost destroyed because it was either smoking dope or the Vietnam veterans. They're the only people I could connect with. Nobody else mattered. And that went on for a couple of years.
Yep.
And now you pointed out about the isolation, and the only people you could really relate to were those people who were there with you. And I'd have never realized it until you just brought it up now.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I hope this makes sense to some of you all. But that's the end of my presentation. John, I thank you for coming here, and you folks, I really thank you for being here.